The story begins in the suffocating heat of San Francisco. 1981. Chris Gardner was a man walking a tightrope over an abyss. Every morning, he adjusted his tie, picked up a heavy, 40-pound medical bone density scanner, and set out to sell a dream that no one wanted to buy. These machines were his entire life savings. But to the doctors he visited, they were overpriced junk. He spent his days lugging these white elephants up the steep hills of the city, his suit soaked in sweat, his lungs burning, only to be met with cold rejections. Each no was a hammer blow to his soul, representing another day he couldn't pay for daycare or the mounting pile of eviction notices on his kitchen table. At home, the silence was louder than any argument. The financial strain had eroded the foundation of his marriage. His wife, Linda, worked double shifts at a laundry, her spirit crushed by the relentless cycle of poverty. The dinner table was a place of cold cereal and whispered resentment. Eventually, the tension snapped. Linda left, leaving Chris with their 5-year-old son, Christopher Jr. In that moment, Chris was a man with a shattered heart, a failing business, and a child who looked at him as if he were a superhero, unaware that his father was staring at total ruin. The true descent into darkness happened when the landlord finally changed the locks. Chris found himself on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, a broken medical scanner, and a confused little boy. They spent their first nights in cheap motels, then moved to flophouses, until the money completely ran out. The lowest point of this journey took place in the bowels of a BART subway station. With nowhere left to turn, Chris led his son into a public restroom and locked the door. To keep the boy from being terrified, Chris turned it into a game, telling him they were time travelers hiding in a cave from dinosaurs. On that cold, tiled floor, Chris laid out sheets of toilet paper to create a makeshift bed for his son. As the boy slept, Chris sat with his back against the door, his feet braced against the frame. Throughout the night, angry commuters rattled the handle and pounded on the wood, shouting for him to open up. Chris sat there in the flickering fluorescent light, tears streaming down his face, suffocating his own sobs so he wouldn't wake his child. He wasn't just guarding a bathroom door. He was guarding the last remains of his dignity. Yet, amidst this misery, a flicker of hope appeared. Chris had seen a man parking a red Ferrari and asked him how he achieved such success. The answer was stockbroking. With nothing but raw nerves and a desperate hunger, Chris managed to talk his way into an internship at the prestigious firm Dean Wider Reynolds. But the cruelty of the situation was almost unbearable. The internship lasted 6 months, and it paid absolutely nothing. For half a year, Chris lived a double life that would have broken 1,000 other men. By day, he was a sophisticated trainee in a high-rise office. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. He developed a maniacal efficiency, never hanging up the phone between cold calls to save 3 seconds per dial. He didn't even drink water, so he wouldn't have to waste time going to the bathroom. He was competing against Ivy League graduates who went home to hot meals, while he was secretly starving. At exactly 5 p.m., the professional became a fugitive. Chris would grab his son from daycare and sprint, literally, run through the streets of San Francisco to reach the Glide Memorial Homeless Shelter. If they weren't in line by a certain time, they would lose their bed. Often, they were too late. They spent nights sleeping under office desks, in parks, or at the airport. Chris would study his complex finance textbooks by the dim light of street lamps while his son slept on his lap in the cold. He was learning how to manage millions of dollars while he didn't have a nickel for a payphone. The ultimate test arrived on the day of his final job interview. The night before, Chris had been thrown in jail for $1,200 in unpaid parking tickets. He was released the next morning with no time to go home. He showed up at the corporate headquarters wearing a paint-splattered jacket and sneakers, looking like a vagabond in a room full of millionaires. When the partners asked why they should hire a man who looked like he just crawled out of a gutter, Chris looked them in the eye and spoke from the depths of his struggle. He told them that if they asked him a question he didn't know, he would tell them he didn't know, but he would work harder than anyone else to find the answer. His raw honesty and visible hunger won them over. He got the job. The moment he walked out of that building and realized he finally had a paycheck, he stood in the middle of a crowded sidewalk and began to clap for himself, his hands shaking, his face wet with tears of pure relief. He had crossed the desert. Chris didn't just become a broker. He became a legend. He went on to found his own firm, Gardner Rich & Co., starting with a single wooden desk and eventually selling his stake in a multi-million-dollar deal. The man who once slept on a bathroom floor became one of the wealthiest and most influential philanthropists in America. He eventually bought the very building where he used to wait in line for food and turned it into a center for the homeless. His life became a testament to a single, powerful truth he once told his son: if you have a dream, you have to protect it. If you want something, go get it. Period. Should I add more specific descriptions of his cold calls or the final exam to fill more screen time? In conclusion, Chris Gardner's journey was never just a story about moving from rags to riches. It was living proof that hope is an engine that never runs out of fuel. The man who once slept on a cold bathroom floor now owns a private jet. Yet he never truly left behind the man he used to be. Years later, Chris bought the very building where he once stood in line for a bed and a warm meal, transforming it into a center for the homeless. He proved to the world that true success is not measured by the millions you accumulate, but by the number of hands you reach back to lift up. His life remains a testament to the fact that your current circumstances do not determine where you end up. They only determine where you begin. It serves as a reminder that the darkest, most silent nights are often the ones just before the brightest sunrise of success. Would you like me to create a high-energy intro hook to capture your audience's attention in the first 30 seconds?